My name is Bill McCoy. I'm the Chief Technology Officer for Phigenics. Um, we're very pleased that you would take time to join us in this um, period of crisis. And we know that you have many priorities that are higher than um, other priorities. You have critical issues that you're dealing with. So we intend, the four of us, intend to uh, do the most we can with this 1 hour together. I'd like to introduce the people that will be speaking with me on the webinar. Missy Kane, who's our Director of Support Services, Jay Reading, our VP of Engineering, and Monica Kyle, who's our Marketing Director and our Communications Coordinator. The three of us have been fielding lots and lots of questions from our clients and also from the general public. Questions about water management during this period of crisis. And that's the topic of our webinar today. We've taken all of these questions that we've received and put them into three categories that we'll be covering. Before we get into it though, I would like to just state that in this time where higher priorities really are consuming our attention, and in this period during which facility management is really unprecedented. We're in a period of unprecedented priority in facility management. The four of us want you to know that with regards to the water management in your facility, we are here really to help. And this is a time to be unified and for people to come together. So my message to you is that our company, along with our peers, our colleagues in other companies, other water management organizations, and the water treatment industry, we all are ready to help you and really have your back, so to speak, when in this period, you may not be able to prioritize your attention to water management. So please consider this, and I know my peers around the industry and all four of us would agree, we want to make sure that you don't have to worry about the water systems in your facilities. With water management programs implemented properly, you can really rest assured that while we're dealing with the high priority crisis, we can be confident that the water safety in your facility is taken care of. Now, we're going to be dealing with specific questions that arise with regard to water management in all sorts of facilities. And just as a quick note, in regard to our approach to this or our bias, it's always important to make a statement about where your bias lies, because there's always bias. Now it's a question of where the bias lies. So for Phigenics, we can confidently tell you that we don't sell hazard control products. We don't sell anything except defensible data-driven water management programs which verify and validate building water systems. And we try and do that from a basis of independence. And again, we're just really ready to help. We are going to now enter into topics for discussion in these three categories. Jay Reading will deal with this first category or topic for discussion, and he'll be dealing with questions that have come in from our clients and from the general public. Then Missy Kane will talk about the second topic, water safety in healthcare facilities during high occupancy. And then the third topic, Missy will take us into, and then I'll speak on for a few minutes, water management during rapid response for adaptive reuse of buildings. And this, of course, is a timely topic for discussion in this COVID-19 crisis we're in. And then we will wrap up with questions and answers, and Monica will lead us through a question and answer period. Feel free to submit some questions if you haven't already. We've got a long list of questions that have already come in, and we will deal with all the questions. If we run out of time in this 1 hour block, then you will receive a response from us. that gives answers to your questions. And also when the webinar is over, if other questions occur to you that haven't been asked, you can email those to webinar at phygenics.com, or email to any of the speakers that are talking on these topics for discussion today, and we will respond. So now I'd like to turn it over to Jay Reading, who is our VP of Engineering and is also a co-founder of Phigenics. Jay?
Thank you, Bill. I'm going to talk about two key areas that should be reviewed in facilities with low or no occupancy. The first thing I'm going to talk about are control locations, and I'm going to talk about locations you may not think of as control locations. The second area I'm going to talk about are control measures that you may or can apply to these locations to keep your water safe. So let's move to the next slide, and first of all, we'll talk about specifically control location. What is a control location? It really starts when your water enters the facility. So when your water enters a facility, receiving is a control location. This is really important, and it's taken for granted, and it's very important during these times that we're currently in. There may be low use water throughout the area your facility is located in. It is important to verify that you have disinfectant coming in to the entrance of your facility. Go as close to the entrance of facility, all your supply points, and make sure that you have disinfectant supplied by the municipality. That's your first control location. Without disinfectant coming in there in a no use or a low use situation, you're going to start to have trouble. Once the water enters the building, you have some processing steps that you need to take a look at. And I will start with a typical hospitality or healthcare facility. One of the very first processing steps that people do and don't consider processing step is softening. When water use drops, the softeners may become fouled and can actually remove any disinfectant that came into the facility. We need to look after softening, especially on water that's softened for potable uses such as heating. Make sure that you have disinfectant directly after the softeners. From softeners, it goes to heating. Heating is the process that will speed up the removal of the disinfectant, but another challenge with low or no occupancy is the water age will go to days. When water circulates throughout your facility, no fresh water is brought in, disinfectant would be removed or at a very low level, and you need to verify that you have disinfectant in the heating recirculation loop. A third control location, cooling towers. I've been asked many questions on this. Do I lay them up dry or do I keep water in them? You can do either and make it work, but if you're leaving water in them, you should continue to recirculate and treat. Just because a chiller isn't on doesn't mean the bacteria can't grow there and potentially harm people when the cooling towers are activated or just air flows over them. So the key processing steps are the entrance, softening, heating, and cooling towers. You want to make sure that once the water gets to your fixtures, and this is where it can become difficult. I know many healthcare or hospitality facilities don't have people flushing fixtures. If you have the luxury, make sure on a periodic basis, and what I mean by that is a bare minimum weekly, if you have the manpower available, make sure that you flush the fixtures to the point where you see disinfectant at the use. That's validating disinfectant at the point of use. So when we think of this, look at your water coming in, look at those key processing steps, and make sure you take the disinfectant all the way through to the fixture. That's nice to know what you're looking for, but what can you do? These are the control measures that you can apply. At the entrance, you may need to flush water. And when we say flush water, I would start in the range of gallons per minute, which is 1,440 gallons per day. It certainly depends on the facilities around you, how big your supply line is, but that's the kind of magnitude when we say flushing you need to look at. Again, once you begin a flushing protocol, you want to verify that the flushing accomplished what it did. So where can you flush? You certainly can flush at the entrance. If you have a very low census or low occupancy, and you're not adding supplemental disinfection, flushing the heating, hot water recirculating loop, starting with 1 gallon per minute is a very good idea. It's a small amount of water. If you're spending $10 per thousand for sewing or for purchase and sewage, that's $10 a day, not a lot, to make sure that you don't foul that heating hot water system. Fixtures, again, flushing, those are all control measures. Something we see often in facilities with low use is softeners. If they go offline and sit stagnant, you're going to need to go in there and manually regenerate to keep the bed from fouling and becoming basically loaded with bacteria and injecting into your system. So you may want to go from a flow-based regeneration to a time-based regeneration. Cooling towers, again, holding time like heating hot water. You may not call because you're not evaporating to drain the water, but you're going to want to drain a small amount of water if you're leaving water in those cooling towers so that your holding time doesn't go over 3 or 4 days. That can create other microbiological challenges. So to wrap it up, you've got control locations you need to look at. That would be coming into the facility, softening, heating, and the cooling towers, and then certainly validating that you're taking the disinfectant to the fixtures. And then the control measures is flushing. That will handle most of your areas. Softeners, regeneration, and on cooling towers, making sure you have a small bleed so that your holding time doesn't get excessive. I'm going to turn this over to Missy. If you have further questions, please submit those, and we'll be preparing for those answers as the other presenters are going on. Thank you. Missy?
Thank you, Jay. Hello, everyone. Picking up on that question and answer opportunity, if you have not used the Q&A function in a Zoom webinar before, you can locate the Q&A button in your lower toolbar, which should be visible beneath the presentation slide. So going on from Jay's review, in conditions of low or no water use in your building, he shared some very important tactical, immediate points that you can investigate and verify to ensure the water system remains safe and high quality during the COVID-19 response term. Bigger picture, for many of you in the audience today, we've received questions, feedback, and concern about how to maintain your water management program during the pandemic response, recognizing that you have had a water management team that's very functional for your facility, that has developed a program and in many, many cases implemented and operationalized a program, but yet now this same team of people have been dispatched to very high priority tasks and conditions in your building. So the question being asked is, how can I maintain my program during this immediate time frame? And what are the tasks and objectives that will keep the building users safe and ready for possible changes to use occupancy due to COVID-19? So 3 points for discussion today. Water management team decision-making is critical, and we note this for healthcare facilities as high occupancy rates are expected and predicted. In the event that your facility is a designated isolation facility or an area of the building is being prepared for isolation, it's important that the water management team efficiently convene to discuss impact and any necessary steps. And those necessary steps pick up upon the tactical points Jay reviewed as well. So in low or no use conditions, verifying data at control locations, absolutely critical for your facility. But those are the same types of spots in your water management program during high occupancy that should be verified. How can the team discuss these points when you literally do not have enough minutes in your day? And so some points for recommendation today include modifying water management team meetings to be remote if possible. If traditionally your team meets, let's say on a quarterly basis, in person to collaborate and review data, it may be very necessary at this time to move to a remote format. Even more importantly, that your traditional water management team meetings may be 45 minutes to an hour in length, because there's typically a large amount of data to review. There's annual goals for your program that the team is pursuing, and there's critical action items and project management to review. Some of those things certainly may not be possible at this time. So the recommendation today is to focus upon the key data that you will use for decision-making purposes in this pandemic response. Read ahead data summaries. If you have a facilitator for your water management program, maybe an excellent way to reduce meeting time, where perhaps you've met for an hour and now you're going to have a 15-minute tactical review around those control locations, the disinfectant levels and the temperatures and the water flows at those key points in your water process. So that leads you to the opportunity to focus your available resources on those key control measures. You can't focus resources until you know your data. And so that may be the most critical point for you to uncover and confirm. If you have a program in your healthcare facility and it's operationalized and you expect and predict high occupancy, a key task right now would be to understand your current data around disinfectant and water age. From this point, you may need to discuss with your water management team how you will continue to validate the safety and quality of the water system. At Phigenics, we see a spectrum of validation strategies with our clients and the overall healthcare market. This can include environmental validation using traditional Legionella culture methods, as well as clinical validation using disease surveillance for Legionella or other arising waterborne pathogens. We often see a combination of the two, environmental and clinical. In this condition, in an immediate time frame, notably which you have high occupancy, possible access issues to distal fixtures or key areas of the healthcare facility, you may need to review your sample collection methods and procedures, as well as the personnel that have historically collected those samples. In the case of Phigenics, we have been actively discussing with clients who've expressed the need, training procedures to move the collection of water samples from a Phigenics representative to a facility operator. And in that discussion of training also includes a revision when necessary of the actual sampling plan. Confirming incoming cold water disinfectant residuals and bacteria conditions is becoming more and more important, as well as post-softener and circulating hot water potable loops that Jay referred to. The second point that may be worth considering in this immediate term for your water management team and the validation strategy include molecular screening methods. In this case, molecular methods can complement your culture results, notably those of you who have a historical basis of Legionella culture results, and the molecular test methods can deliver next day results with a very high accuracy to drive your decision making to areas where molecular detections are positive, and therefore eliminating the negative or non-detectable molecular results. More to come in today's discussion on this topic from Bill, but these 2 points around sample collection methodologies and resources, as well as molecular methods, can frame up some solutions to immediately address validation needs. How does this all interface with projections in the current condition around high occupancy buildings, whether they're healthcare or hospitality, universities, commercial buildings? As many of you may be reading in the media, there is indication that we are preparing in the United States for adaptive reuse of buildings. And so that effort to provide necessary space to isolate and care for patients with COVID-19 warrants consideration of how you will address the water safety and quality in those spaces. So this information summarizes the benefits of addressing a rapid response around water management in those adaptive conditions. It's critical to reduce the risk of waterborne disease, just as you do with the existing water management program for your building. Continuing from that, on the left, you'll see 3 critical points that I'm going to talk a little bit about here. And it focuses around maintaining a reliable source of water during this urgent response. It fits into reducing dependency on limited outside water sources, where you may have increased difficulty with supply chain for bottled water. And it ties directly into your caregiver's ability to perform hand hygiene and bathing activities during the COVID-19 outbreak. Additionally, this fits into protecting healthcare staff and caregivers. We know how critical these members of our society are, and it's in your best interest and all of our interests to ensure that they have an environment with a safe water source. Bigger picture, owner defensibility, asset management, and documentation opportunities exist around a concerted and centralized rapid response around your water systems if adaptive reuse is within your organization's potential scope. So with that in mind, I'm going to pass it back to Bill McCoy to speak a little more in depth about those validation strategies, as our questions for today are indicating that many have had this area of discussion.
Thank you, Missy. With regard to adaptive reuse and rapid response, we thought that it would be helpful to share an example, or you might say a case study, where a very rapid response was necessary to adapt the use of a low occupancy wing in a healthcare facility. And the goal was to use this low occupancy wing for patients with SARS-CoV-2 infections, so COVID-19 disease patients. A molecular screen that detects Legionella DNA very reliably was used by the water management team and facility managers to assess water safety in that wing of the building, with the expectation that results would be available the very next day after sampling. Of course, the hope was that there would be no detections, because negative PCR results are very reliable in predicting negative culture results. Culture results not available for 10 to 14 days after sampling. The results came back all positive, PCR positive, almost all. Very few PCR negative samples in that wing. So the facility manager was able to determine the very next day that precautions were necessary. PCR positive results indicate the presence of DNA from Legionella that could be viable, injured, or killed Legionella. But any of those categories were enough of a concern so that the rapid response for adaptive reuse of that wing included protecting the patients from exposure to the tap water in those buildings. So this is an example where the results were very directive. They were very helpful for the facility managers to take precautions, and they didn't have to wait for almost 2 weeks to get culture results. Many other examples coming from adaptive reuse kinds of activities, and we just really encourage you to consider rapid response before using a low occupancy wing with very ill patients. Okay, so now what we'd like to do is move into a period of question and answers. Monica will lead us through questions that have come in from the field and questions that have been posted during the webinar. Missy, Jay, and I, and Monica will field the questions. Maybe Monica will read them to us, and so that everyone can hear the question. And then Monica, if you'll indicate which of us you think should answer. And then of course, anyone on the panel, feel free to amplify the answer or add anything you like.
Thank you, Bill. I'm going to direct the first question to you. And the first question is Phigenics continuing with water management and laboratory activities during the pandemic? And if so, what precautions are you taking?
Okay, yes, thanks. Phigenics is an essential business because we are providing a public health service to our clients in every segment of the facility management marketplace. So yes, our laboratories are fully functional and fully capable at running at full capacity. So we're receiving samples and reporting results continuously. Our field people are all at work and ready to go. They are sensitive to whatever need would be expressed by the client, the facility manager, with regard to a visit. We can, of course, visit, but we are also encouraging remote meetings, as Missy described a few minutes ago. As to what we're doing to protect our employees in the laboratories, it's a little bit stressful because PPE, personal protective equipment, is required, and social distancing in the lab. We're also staggering our work hours to minimize the number of people that are in the lab at any one time. But we're fully functional, wearing N95 masks in the lab. We're sterilizing masks with UV sterilizers. And so far we have no disease cases in our 3 laboratories. We have 3 laboratories all functioning. Next question.
Thank you, Bill. I'm going to direct this next question to Jay. The question is, we are only at approximately 20% occupancy due to preparation for coronavirus. How can we prepare to open a wing or keep a wing safe during times when occupancy is low?
Thank you, Monica. The key here is verification of your control measures. And you've got one of 3 basically in potable water. You're either relying on the disinfectant the city supplies, you're adding supplemental disinfectant, or you're heating the water. Verification is the actual steps you take to make sure that what you're trying to do, you're accomplishing. So make sure that water's hot enough and that there's enough disinfectant in the water. Once you have done that, starting at the beginning of the facility to recirculating loop to the end of the fixture, you then need to validate that the water is safe. And that is data that tells you it is actually safe. That could be started with a molecular detection next day PCR that Bill talked about, or we have other rapid tests that could be utilized depending on your needs. But you want to verify that the control measures you're applying are being applied as desired, and then you want to validate with data that you've accomplished the goal of keeping the water safe from a microbiological level. Thanks, Monica.
Thank you. Missy, I'm going to direct this next question to you. What do we need to consider with water when converting rooms to negative pressure isolation rooms?
Thanks, Monica. That's a great question. And I know I've personally heard that question 2 separate times just this week. That seems to be a common practice for many healthcare facilities across the country that under typical operation only have a few or handful of negative pressure rooms for isolation. In this case, the key perspective is to consider how the safety of the environment is being assessed and determined. In a negative pressure room, typically air quality testing is performed to ensure that the air is safe for the patients that would be kept and cared for in that area, as well as obvious confirmation of air exchanges based on the definitions of negative pressure in a healthcare facility. The connection here around what to do with the water system is pretty direct. If you think of the perspective that the criteria and the steps necessary to ensure safety around air are taken, the same steps to ensure safety of water should be on a checklist or a process to move forward. In that case, continuing from Jay's points of verifying control measures in the upstream processing steps of your building, your incoming water, your post softener, your hot water loop, and looking at those disinfectant levels and those temperatures, this is now all culminating to what is actually occurring at the distal fixture, the sinks and the showers in these negative pressure rooms. So in that case, it again is addressing the level of disinfectant that is measured at those fixtures in the room, and then comparing that data to what the conditions are in the circulating hot water loop or upstream cold water system. Validation fits very well here, notably in regards to the screening methods that Bill described. As with a next day molecular test, you can rule out areas where the water is indicated to be safe, and then focus your efforts where positive PCR detections are uncovered.
Thank you, Missy. I'm going to direct this next question to Bill. We've actually gotten a couple questions around this topic of drinking fountains, water fountains. The question is, our enterprise is requiring us to shut the valves off to all facility drinking fountains. What flushing would Phigenics recommend, and what should the startup procedure look like? And also, what is our general feedback on the requirement to shut off water fountains?
Thanks, Monica. For water fountains and decorative fountains, we'll start with that. There are specific requirements for disinfection in the water features. Starting them back up after being shut down almost always requires cleaning, physical cleaning, depending on the weather and the climate that they're in. We would caution that water features can amplify pathogenic microorganisms very rapidly, especially if they're heated by any lighting features. So restarting them, actually, I think the recommendation we would make at this point is during this crisis, it's best to just leave them off. We would suggest that until we get through this crisis and get past more important priorities, probably best just to leave them off. Drinking water fountains are another matter. There's a great variety in the configurations of drinking water fountains, and the manufacturing specifications for preventative maintenance are critical. They should be followed. There's so many different designs and cooling units on drinking fountains, it's very hard to generalize. There again, during this crisis, certainly we would recommend leaving those off if they're already off until we get through this crisis, and then we can more systematically turn them back on.
Okay, thank you, Bill. I'm going to direct this next question back to Missy. So the question is, what is the best way to continue managing our water and water management program during this pandemic?
Thanks, Monica. I mean, that's really the core question here today, with so many examples fitting under this umbrella. To summarize some of the points from earlier in this webinar, becoming tactical and fitting within the incident command mindset or public health response is truly going to suit you and focus your available resources and time. So with that focus comes review of your data. It's critical during a tactical response to use the data in front of you, understand the water management program data, the verification and validation data we've been discussing today under normal operating conditions, and confirm that you're maintaining the safety and quality of the building. From that point, tactical meetings and briefer updates can be accomplished remotely, and Phigenics is certainly prepared with our clients to modify and tweak our facilitation to be remote. The Phigenics Support and Training Center centralizes the development and support of water management programs across our field teams, and in this current condition, the available resources to ensure an effective remote interface are certainly available to you. Through that effort, we can support the documentation to maintain defensibility of your program while you focus on the necessary tasks around the pandemic.
Great, thank you, Missy. I'm going to direct this next question back to Jay. And the question is, how can we continue to test our water and validate our program during this time?
Great question, and thanks for asking, whoever sent that in. It's really important to do that because, first of all, validation is the evidence that your water is safe. And what's happening during these times, the way you use water is changing. You may need to adjust your water management program slightly to keep it safe. So validation is critical to do it. So there's the step of doing, there's a process of doing it, and then there's a physical aspect to how do you do it. I know many healthcare facilities are now not letting any visitors in rooms. You may have to have someone collect a water sample and bring it out and have it processed at a different location from that room. But it's absolutely critical that you continue to validate, because your water and how you use it is changing with the different types of patients, the different capacities, and just the whole water systems for a municipality that are being used less. So it's really important. You may need to do it differently. You may not be able to process it right on site. Maybe it's done in the utility plant. We can work with you, your engineers, your infection preventionists, whoever it is, and help you validate that water so you know it's safe for your patients. Great question.
Thank you, Jay. I'm going to direct this next question to Bill. And Bill, this question is, what measures are facilities putting in place to make sure that their water is safe for their employees and patients?
Thanks for that question. It's right to the point, and the answer relates directly back to the points that Jay made, especially for the low occupancy type buildings. The most concise way to describe it is to reduce water age in the potable water system of the building and make sure that the disinfectant concentrations are in spec or high enough. Now, those are the two main measures that can be made. And I take the question to refer to control measures. The control measures are to reduce the water age and make sure the disinfectant is in an effective concentration. The temperature, the water temperature in the hot water system is also important. And if there's any hot water storage tanks, they should be maintained at a high enough temperature to help disinfect the water. Now, on the cooling water side of things, the non-potable water, it's very important to keep the water treatment program running as designed. Make sure that corrosion, scale, and microbial control is adequate in the cooling tower.
Okay, thank you for that. And Bill, I'm going to stay with you for this next question that came in. And it is, what lessons have we learned from Italy and Europe? So I'm going to let you take that one.
Okay, I'm going to direct the answer to water management in Italy and Europe. Of course, probably everyone on the call is watching all the disease case reports from the different countries around the world, and I'm not going to comment on that. That's not our field of expertise, and there's a lot of speculation and opinion going on about what all that data with regard to COVID-19 means. So I'm not going to deal with that in answer to your question, but I will talk to you about the water management around Europe. The specifications in Europe for water safety have been in place for longer than they have been in the United States. There are water safety specifications that are usually country specific, but also the World Health Organization has published since 2007 very clear specifications on the water safety plan process. It's very, very similar. In fact, it's functionally identical to the ASHRAE Standard 188, which was published in 2015 in the United States. It's based on hazard analysis and control. It works very well. So all of that is relevant to this answer because it indicates that with confidence, we can say that in Europe, Italy, and the other countries, water management will be proceeding along the same lines that we've been talking about here. And facility managers in Europe can be confident that water safety in their buildings will be good and adequate so that they can focus on these higher priority issues that will keep us all occupied in this pandemic for a few more weeks at least.
Okay, thank you for those comments, Bill. I'm going to direct the next question to Jay. And the question is there a standard protocol for treating and flushing hot and cold potable water distribution systems after a period of low or no use and before occupants are allowed to use the water? And if there is a standard protocol, where can these be accessed?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I don't know if there's a standard protocol for treating or flushing. To me, that means you must do X, Y, and Z. But the bottom line is there is a standard for drinking water, which both hot and cold falls under, and that's the EPA Safe Drinking Water Act. You receive water that meets that standard, and it's a building owner's and manager's responsibility to keep it at that standard. So depending on what your facility has been through, the easy answer is you need to implement control measures, flushing, heating, or disinfection that will bring it back and meet those standards. In those standards, there's such that there's the overall quality of water would be there's a total heterotrophic aerobic bacterial count that you need to meet. Obviously, there should be no Legionella, and there's many other parameters in there that you can test for readily to make sure that your water meets the Safe Drinking Water Act. That's, I hope that answers the question that the person had in mind, but it really goes back to, let's not let it deteriorate to a point where we need to start reviewing Safe Drinking Water Act standards and keep the water moving. Do that with verification, keep the disinfectant level in there, don't let biofilm form, and that won't even be an issue. So thanks for the question.
Okay, thank you. And then Bill, I'm going to direct this one back to you, and this is actually the last question that we've got at this point. So the question is, for sample collection in healthcare facilities during high occupancy, do you recommend a total coliform analysis? And if not, what are the best parameters to sample for?
Okay, thank you for that question. If there's no supplemental disinfection in the building, then coliform analyses are not required by the regulations that govern the Safe Drinking Water Act. And we would not advocate coliform testing in building water samples that are receiving water treated to the National Primary Drinking Water Standard, which is the regulation that supports the Safe Drinking Water Act. And the reason for that is the water received, even to a high occupancy building, will have been treated to an extent that eliminates any viable coliforms. Now, if supplemental disinfection is being applied, then there are regulations that govern that application, and coliform testing would be required, but that is a matter of the permit that you would have already had. Bottom line is that coliforms in building water systems are very, very rarely a problem. Now, the other part of the question is, what should you measure in building water systems? Certainly Legionella, viable Legionella, should be measured in building water systems as the environmental validation evidence to confirm that the water is safe. We would also suggest, especially in chloroaminated water, that mycobacterium should be measured. Other waterborne pathogens that are of concern, especially to people who are already very ill or immunocompromised, are the pseudomonads. And Burkholderia is in that category, as well as Stenotrophomonas. All of these waterborne pathogens relating to Pseudomonas would be a good idea to measure them. It's easy to do from the same samples that you would take for Legionella testing. And I can tell you, in relation to the question previously about Europe, we know that the Europeans are becoming very motivated to validate control of Pseudomonas and Mycobacterium in their building water systems because really of co-infections. Someone already infected with a viral upper respiratory disease is more susceptible to infections of these kinds of bacteria, opportunistic pathogens that would not affect healthy people. Healthcare professionals already know about co-infections from these other waterborne pathogens, but people who are not necessarily in healthcare or in the infection preventionist field may not know that patients who are already infected with a viral agent may be much more susceptible to some of these waterborne pathogens that are opportunistic and really not of much concern at all to healthy people in the building. Thank you for that question. It was excellent, as were all the questions, and we are eager to answer any questions that would come in later at any time. We're going to end the webinar now, unless there are any other questions coming in. And we'll just give it a minute or two more. Wrapping this up, we will make the recording available to anyone who wants it. And we do have just a couple of minutes left. So I'll just ask any of the panelists to make a final comment if they'd like. And if not, I'll just summarize and we'll conclude the webinar. Any comments?
No, this is Missy Kane. No comments, but thanks to all who took the time to participate and have this important discussion.
Good. Okay. I think our final word to you is that in this time where really there's a crisis, unprecedented, that we're all dealing with, we want you to feel confident that your water systems are well managed and safe. And we want to be a part of the solution to helping you rapidly respond if there's an adaptive reuse project necessary in your facility. And we want to help you reopen buildings that may be in very low occupancy right now or not being used at all. And I know I speak for our peers in the other water management companies around the country and the water treatment companies, the people who are providing devices. This is the time for all of us to unify behind and in support of you folks, the people who are managing these facilities. So please call us at any time. You can email us or give us a call at any time. Thank you very much for your attention, and Monica for organizing the webinar. And we'll sign off now. Thank you.